Every day we're bombarded with headlines: border crisis, migrant surge, immigration strain. You hear about overcrowded facilities, economic burdens, and social tensions. Perhaps you felt the frustration, the fear, or the confusion. You might wonder, why is this happening? Why does it feel like a problem with no solution? You're not alone. This constant state of crisis, this feeling of being overwhelmed, is a shared experience across the US, the UK, South Africa, and now increasingly France. But what if this isn't just a series of unfortunate events? What if the immigration crisis isn't a bug in the system, but a feature? What if the chaos, the division, and the perpetual sense of emergency are not accidental, but are, in fact, the intended outcome of a deeper, hidden design? This documentary will reveal that the very systems meant to manage immigration are, by their core design, perpetuating the crisis for specific powerful interests. To understand this hidden design, we must look beyond the headlines and into the historical blueprints. We'll introduce you to a concept that explains everything: the Labor Control Continuum. It's a thread that connects seemingly disparate events across centuries and continents, from the 19th century colonial contracts that literally defined human value based on labor, to the modern-day financial reports of private corporations profiting from detention. This continuum reveals how immigration policies have always been, and continue to be, about the control of labor and the consolidation of power. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Modern borders were designed to control labor, not people. This isn't a new phenomenon. Its roots stretch back to colonial contracts and the systematic control of human movement for economic gain. In the post-World War II era, Britain faced a severe labor shortage. The Windrush generation, individuals from Caribbean countries, were invited to help rebuild the nation. They arrived between 1948 and 1971, filling vital roles in manufacturing, construction, hospitality, and crucially, the nascent National Health Service. The intention, seemingly, was to solve a problem: a lack of workers. But what was hidden beneath the surface was a system designed for short-term, disposable labor. The Windrush scandal, which erupted in 2018, exposed the brutal reality of this unspoken contract. Individuals who had legally resided in the UK for decades, contributing to its society, were wrongly detained, denied legal rights, and even threatened with deportation. This wasn't an accident. It was the chilling consequence of a hostile environment policy, deliberately crafted to make life unbearable for those deemed undesirable, regardless of their legal status. Across the Atlantic, the United States implemented its own version of controlled labor migration, the Bracero Program. From 1942 to 1964, millions of Mexican men were brought to the US on temporary contracts, primarily to work in agriculture. This program, initially framed as a wartime necessity, created a pipeline of cheap labor. But when the program ended, the demand for this labor didn't disappear. Instead, it shifted underground. The abrupt termination of the Bracero program, coupled with the continued need for agricultural workers, inadvertently created the very category of illegal immigrant it claimed to combat. Former braceros, now without legal avenues, continued to cross the border, and the term illegal became a pervasive label. Efforts to formalize labor, such as the E-Verify system, have been consistently undermined by powerful agricultural lobbying groups who benefit from a readily available exploitable workforce. In South Africa, the legacy of colonial contracts is even more stark. The apartheid regime built its economic power on the backs of migrant labor, particularly in the gold and diamond mines. Workers, many from Mozambique, were forced into a system designed for control and exploitation, serving as shock absorbers for labor strikes and maintaining racial segregation. Even after the fall of apartheid in 1994, the promise of open borders by the new ANC government was largely political theatre. Without a robust economic plan to integrate these migrants, existing inequalities were exacerbated, fueling a dangerous rise in xenophobia. Groups like Operation Dudula, often with political backing, have capitalized on these tensions, blaming foreign nationals for systemic issues and diverting attention from governmental failures. France, too, has a long history as a land of immigration, often driven by labor shortages dating back to the 19th century. And, however, its post-colonial immigration policies, particularly after decolonization in the 1960s, reveal a complex paradox. While France needed workers from its former colonies, especially from the Maghreb and West Africa, its approach to integration often prioritized assimilation over multiculturalism, leading to unique challenges. In 1974, France officially restricted immigration from its former colonies, yet the flow continued, driven by economic realities and existing family ties. This created a situation where many immigrants, though vital to the French economy, faced systemic discrimination and social exclusion. The weight of France's colonial past continues to shape its immigration and integration policies, with surveillance practices often reflecting a post-colonial order. Today, despite labor shortages in over 95 industries, particularly in technology, healthcare, construction and hospitality, France grapples with how to address these needs without exacerbating social tensions, often against a backdrop of rising far-right sentiment. The crisis we see today is not a series of isolated incidents. It's a carefully constructed chain of failures, driven by hidden agendas that prioritize profit and political expediency over human dignity. The Immigration Reform and Control Act, IRCA, of 1986 was meant to be a landmark piece of legislation, offering amnesty to some undocumented immigrants while also introducing employer sanctions and the E-Verify system. The intention was to curb unauthorized immigration. But the reality was far different. Powerful agricultural lobbies actively sabotaged the effective implementation of E-Verify, ensuring a continued supply of cheap, undocumented labor. Leaked memos from organizations like the Farm Bureau in the 1990s reveal a deliberate strategy to weaken enforcement, prioritizing corporate profits over immigration control. In the UK, the hostile environment policy, championed by successive governments, was sold to the public as a means to deter illegal immigration and stop the boats. Yet internal Home Office documents and expert analysis suggest that officials knew it would not effectively stop channel crossings. Instead, it served as a form of budget theatre, a public display of toughness designed to distract from deeper issues and justify lucrative contracts with private detention companies like Serco. The focus on small boats conveniently diverts attention from the systemic underfunding of public services and the increasing privatization of the NHS. In South Africa, the euphoria of post-apartheid South Africa in 1994 came with a promise of a more inclusive society, including open borders. However, this promise was largely political theatre, lacking a genuine economic plan for integration. The ANC government, despite its rhetoric, failed to address the root causes of poverty and inequality, leaving migrants vulnerable and creating fertile ground for xenophobia. This lack of economic foresight, coupled with the legacy of apartheid's migrant labor system, has allowed xenophobic sentiments to fester and be exploited for political gain. France's Republican model of integration, which emphasizes assimilation into a singular French identity, has often been presented as a pathway to equality. However, critics argue that this model, while seemingly egalitarian, has inadvertently masked systemic inequalities and a continued reliance on immigrant labor without fully acknowledging their distinct cultural contributions. The push for stricter immigration laws, often framed as maintaining social cohesion, can also serve to control labor markets and manage public perception, particularly when facing economic challenges or social unrest. The media often portrays immigration as a series of unpredictable crises. Surges at the border, overcrowded detention centers, social unrest. But what they won't show you is how these crises are often manufactured, serving specific hidden agendas. Despite the manufactured crises and hidden agendas, solutions exist, but these solutions are often suppressed by those who benefit from the current system. The most straightforward solution to undocumented labor in the US, mandatory E-Verify, has been repeatedly blocked by corporate lobbyists. Despite its potential to create a more transparent and legal workforce, powerful interests have ensured its limited implementation, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation and undocumented immigration. The UK's health and care worker visa demonstrates a working model for attracting essential labour. However, its effectiveness is deliberately curtailed by restrictions on dependence and salary thresholds, which deter potential recruits. This suggests a strategic decision to maintain perceived labour shortages, which can then be used to justify further privatisation of the NHS. South Africa's Zimbabwe Exemption Permits, ZEP, offered a glimpse of a successful solution. Studies, including one by the HSRC in 2022, indicated that these permits significantly reduce xenophobic tensions by providing legal status and stability to Zimbabwean migrants. Yet, despite this evidence, the permits were terminated, highlighting a political preference for division over proven solutions. France possesses a significant population of immigrants and their descendants, many of whom are underemployed or face barriers to full economic participation. A true solution would involve investing in these communities, recognizing their skills, and dismantling systemic barriers to employment and social mobility, rather than constantly seeking new labor from abroad, while neglecting those already within its borders. From the 19th century to today, the underlying objective of immigration policies in these nations has remained remarkably consistent: control. Control of labor, control of populations, and control of narratives. The oppressive pass laws of apartheid South Africa, designed to restrict the movement and rights of Black Africans, find a modern echo in the UK's push for digital ID checks. While framed differently, both systems serve as mechanisms for surveillance and control, particularly over marginalized communities. The overtly racist US Immigration Act of 1924, which imposed discriminatory quotas, has evolved into seemingly meritocratic, points-based systems. Yet these modern systems can still perpetuate exclusion by favoring certain demographics, maintaining a continuity of control over who is allowed in and under what terms. The historical recruitment of labour from former colonies in the 1960s, driven by post-war reconstruction needs, finds a contemporary parallel in France's ongoing debates about immigration. While the rhetoric has shifted from explicit labour recruitment to discussions of integration and national identity, the underlying economic demand for labour often remains a driving force, even as political discourse focuses on perceived social burdens. 21st century borders use 19th century colonial tactics, just rebranded. Share this video if you're tired of their border lies.